Hi, I'm Julia.
Hi, I'm Simon. So we're going to talk about the post-conventional clients.
Yeah.
Working with that lot.
Yeah.
It's a thing, because it's almost like saying, well, what would happen in Africa? Like there are a number of different countries in Africa, and there are a number of different levels within post-con. So in some ways, it's quite challenging to make one picture.
Yeah, it's not one picture.
Yeah.
But if you were going to choose a kind of a quality, what would that be?
Self-directed, I think.
Self-directed.
Yeah, I think that for me, a hallmark of post-conventional clients is where there's a real sense of not being so pushed around by the outside world, so shaping my life around expectations out there, and perhaps more of an inner directed life, a desire to be more of me rather than a desire to be more of the version of me that I thought the world wanted.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. I'm just thinking also for some post-con people, the complexity of what they see outside in the world can be kind of confusing and overwhelming. So then, a lot of post-conventional stages, there's a lot of action and agency, and then some are also just, like seeing so much in the world and, in their own inner world as well. Yeah. I mean, I would also look for maybe unusual, different ways of thinking about the world.
As a hallmark for knowing when you're with somebody at a post-conventional level.
Yeah. Like, what is their version of success? Do they have like individualistic versions of success, or are they conventional?
Yeah, and I think there's much more talk of a whole life. Sometimes I work with people at earlier levels, and particularly when it's in a work context, so the coaching is going through their place of work. And I might ask a question like, tell me about your life at the start of a coaching relationship. And what you get is the professional CV. I think with the post-con people, there's much less of that. There's more of an idea of myself as multi-dimensional. I have this life, and I have this life, and this identity, and that identity, and over here I do this. And it's a much fuller kind of representation of life. Emotions, thoughts, beliefs, behaviors.
Yeah, and maybe I'm not so fantastic in all of them.
Yeah, that's
sometimes I'm the idiot in the story, or the one that makes a mess.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can be good at it, but perhaps less sort of self-promotion. Don't have to put myself forward as a kind of an ideal company man or this or that.
I think that's such a good point. Brings up this idea of how people hold and represent their shadow side, the more difficult parts of themselves. I think at earlier levels we can see perhaps a desire to distance oneself from one's shadow, and I think at post-con it's about pulling it in and being quite straightforward with a coach about that.
Yeah.
I messed that up. I didn't get it right. I was really nervous, or I made this mistake, or whatever it is. It's much more easily held, I think, at post-con levels by people.
So it's a kind of a belief that I can't be kind of perfect, and a much more accepting and self-loving way of holding oneself when one messes things up.
Yeah.
And maybe not at the beginning of the post-conventional levels, but sort of working towards that over time, some more self-acceptance and...
Yeah. And I think the balance of who's doing the work in the coaching session as well is quite different. There's a different quality to that. I think at earlier stages, conforming, specializing, I think the coach is expected to do quite a lot of the work and the structuring and the feeding of different ideas and concepts and possibilities. I think that's a little bit looser at the performing level. I think when we get into post-con, really as a coach, your job more often than not, I think, is to get out of the way and just hold lightly rather than impose frameworks, models, advice. You know, these guys have got free thinking and free will, and it's quite easily accessible. And so I think the coach's job is much more to create a container and a relationship for the person to explore themselves, perhaps.
Yeah, I've been in sessions where they've started coaching me. Started looking after me in the session.
What do you do then?
Oh, I just laugh and notice it at them. And then
They'll probably laugh.
Yeah, but there's a sort of a, you know, I can see the intention is to be kind and look after me in some way, which is lovely.
Is it more of a two-way kind of feel?
I think there is more equality.
Yeah.
Perhaps if you are post-con, if you're not, maybe it works differently.
Yeah. And I think they can really take feedback at post-con level. So my experience is you can be quite tough.
I think so. I have experience of that, and a person being quite resilient after that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the identity is not just based on one thing, it's sort of multiple. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of if we were going to look for directions to coach in, I suppose it would be more, you know, working with emotions, working with difference.
I think there's something also about, which has just popped into my head, around there is quite a level of responsibility at post-con level, in as much as less than 20% of adults get here. And so it is likely that the post-con person is having to work quite a bit with people at earlier levels of development. And you know, that thing we always say, the responsibility is to meet people where they are. Knowing that people at earlier stages can't meet post-con, and so it is the responsibility of the person at a later level to meet the others where they are.
Yes.
And I think that's quite an important thing to accentuate. Like, there's a lot of power at this level, actually. So there's also something about, and where will you choose to place yourself in the world? You don't have to stay there anymore because you're much more self-authoring. And so this power, this way of seeing the world, this expanded worldview, the potency that comes with later levels, you can choose where you place that. Big agency, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose our job as coaches is to just follow them, support them, and validate
and challenge
and query.
And I do think that people at post-con get stuck as much as people at conventional levels get stuck, and so just to continue to work with the stuckness, I think it might look different at post-con levels.
Yeah.
They might get lost in, you know, that post-conventional idea of seeing so many different perspectives, including my own, that I can't move because that person's right, that person's right, that person's right, and I'm right, and we all have different perspectives. So there's something about supporting somebody to find their way out of that lostness.
Yeah, and then for some levels at post-con, there can be this politically correct blandness, which you know, almost seems like part of the process of following through into a more engaged, lively life. You know, where you're trying to accommodate everyone in your sentence, and it kind of blands out the feel of the sentence. When you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. It sounds vague, but you know.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And I also think the strength of the coaching relationship is that the deeply interpersonal, emotional connection between coach and client with post-cons, I find it's a more intimate relationship, because I think that levels of vulnerability can generally be a little bit lower. And so the coaching client is much more open to a very authentic relationship with their coach.
Yeah, quite a challenging one, are you saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that.
Good. Anything else that springs up? Knowing that we're trying, of course, to capture 4 stages of development in one conversation about coaching. There are nuances at each of the post-con stages. Anything else broadly spring to mind? Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.